Hare Krishna everyone, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, let us start with the prayers. Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanachhalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So, welcome everyone this Saturday evening in our Bhagavatam class discussion. So, we are continuing our discussion on the 22nd chapter of the 4th canto. Prithu Maharaj meets the four Kumaras. So, this is one of those extraordinary conversations between two great personalities. One who takes the role of a student and one who takes the role of a teacher, where both are very exalted, both are pure devotees, and there's a very beautiful discussion where one takes the role of a disciple, student, a junior, and inquires from the other party in a very humble, respectful way, and a very, very beautiful spiritual conversation emerges, just like the Ganges emerges. It's very, very beautiful. Perfect questions, perfect answers. Srila Prabhupada wrote a book in the early days of Krishna consciousness. Actually, it was compiled mainly between conversations between Bob Cohen, a Peace Corps worker who became Prabhupada's disciple later on, and Srila Prabhupada. A lot of chapters dedicated to beautiful question answers. So when there are beautiful questions and then there are beautiful answers, where both the one who asks questions knows what to ask about, and the one who answers knows perfectly the conclusions of the scriptures, then that conversation is worth recording and worth discussing. And the Bhagavatam is full of so many such beautiful conversations. So this is one of those extraordinary conversations. We completed up to verse 21. The Kumaras have graced the kingdom of Prithu Maharaj. Lord Vishnu himself had blessed Prithu Maharaj that he will be blessed by the association of the four Kumaras. Both the four Kumaras as well as Prithu Maharaj are Shaktiavesh incarnations of the Lord. The four Kumaras are Shaktiavesh incarnations of the Jnana Shakti, the knowledge potency of the Lord. Whereas Prithu Maharaj is an empowered incarnation of the ruling, the Shasan potency of the Supreme Lord. So it's a very beautiful conversation between two empowered incarnations of the Lord. And we have already discussed in the last class how Prithu Maharaj received them so wonderfully in the ideal way, washing their feet, sprinkling the water on his head, very humbly inquiring from them, not asking them how are you, but saying how can I ask you how are you, because you are transcendental. So you please tell us how people like us who are suffering in this world can be delivered. So very beautiful question he asks. And the four Kumaras, being pleased with the humble inquiry of Prithu Maharaj, start very beautifully answering these questions. So this is a very long chapter. Let us see how far we go. I hope, or I intend to complete the chapter today. Krishna willing. By the way, before I forget, tomorrow is Shayana Ekadashi. Whether it's India, Malaysia, Singapore, I think is the same date. It is tomorrow. Observance of the fast is tomorrow. So please do that. Today, the beautiful Bahuda Rath Yatra, which is the return Rath Yatra, is going on in Jagannath Puri. So live telecast was going on. I managed to connect for some time at least. Very beautiful. The Lord has reached Sri Mandir back after his week-long stay at Gundicha. Now he's having a tiff with Lakshmi Devi, who's not willing to let him in because he went to meet his Vrindavan Brajvasis and Radharani. So she's upset that you left such a palatial house and went there to a simple village. So now he's going to have to pacify her, and then he will be allowed in. So there are some very sweet pastimes. So in that sense, it's a special day today. It's a special day tomorrow as well. So we concluded our discussion. We concluded our discussion with verse 21, where the Kumaras answering the question of Prithu Maharaj says that the essential conclusion of all scriptures is established in two principles. Anybody remembers? We concluded with that discussion. What are those two principles?
Eagerly hear and chant the glorification of the Lord.
Okay. You're on the right track, but that is not the exact answer. The exact answer is the broadest definition of spiritual life. And the most simplest definition of spiritual life, which we repeat time and again, time and again, time and again. Almost every class I have speak it at least once.
Detachment from material and attachment to Krishna.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So that's a very simple definition of spiritual life. Detachment from matter and attachment to Krishna. So it says detachment from the bodily concept and attachment or rati to the Lord. That is the sum and substance. Kshemasya hetu. That is what scriptures gives about, and that is what is for the real benefit of the conditioned souls. So having said that and established that as the broadest principle, sometimes some people become overly focused on the detachment aspect when a person is overly focused on the detachment aspect and forgets about the attachment to the Lord, they become their advancement becomes covered over by jnana. Avrita, it becomes jnanena avritam. We don't want our devotion to be covered over by jnana. We may have jnana to develop some amount of detachment from the bodily concept, but we want to simultaneously develop attachment to the Supreme Personality of God. Because when a person develops detachment from matter but fails to develop attachment for Krishna, one tends to lean towards impersonal mukti. And that is the danger. And that is what the path of the Mayavadis, that is the path of the Jnanis, which the Bhaktas do not want to take. So the Bhaktas follow this simultaneous detachment and attachment. The four Kumaras continue their instructions as to how this kind of Jnana Mishra Bhakti, which is both has some aspects of Jnana, but Bhakti is predominant, how it is practiced. And this Jnana Mishra Bhakti ultimately leads one to the point of pure devotion in the Shantarati. There are 5 rasas, right, in pure devotion. Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Shanta or neutrality is the lowest platform in pure devotion. And Jnana Mishra Bhakti can take one highest up to that point. And in Shantarati, one still does not have an active devotional engagement or an active relationship with the Lord. But Shantarati is a form of devotion where there's a lot of awe and veneration for the Lord, but not quite active service. So that's as far as Jnana Mishra Bhakti will go. So initially, the Kumaras are explaining Jnana Mishra Bhakti and they briefly describe that process. So I'm not going to go verse by verse because otherwise it will take too long, but I'm going to summarize what are the essential teachings that the Kumaras mention in terms of making spiritual advancement. The essential principles, whatever the Kumaras are mentioning, are actually nothing new than what we have been discussing all along across Gita and Bhagavatam. And this is actually a very encouraging thing because across the Gita and the Bhagavatam, the key message doesn't change. It's not that one acharya in one conversation tells something else and somebody else says, no, I don't think that works. I think this works. No, they're all very, very consistent. And what are the principles that they mention? It is the same principles that we have been discussing, A, B, C, D. Associate with devotees, read Bhagavatam, chant the holy names, hear and chant the glories of the Lord, worship the Lord, have his prasad, engage in devotional service. These are all the positive aspects of devotional service. Apply the principles of bhakti, especially the Navavida bhakti. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnoho Smaranam Pada Sevanam Marshanam Bandhanam Dasyam Sakyam Atma Nivedanam. All these activities of devotional service are pious in themselves. Shrunvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. Hearing and chanting about the Lord itself is the greatest meritorious spiritual activity. Just as one is cultivating rati to the Lord, one must be careful to not get infected by matter. And what one should do to avoid that, the acharyas explain. Be careful to not associate with materialistic people. Not just materialistic people. Now, what is the definition of materialistic people? Not that just because they're wearing shirt and pant, they are materialistic. Or just because they have a family, they are materialistic. That is not the definition. Those whose lives are simply focused on sense gratification and making money, for whom money is honey. That is the greatest honey that they are looking for in life. Not only such people, but even those who are associating with such people should be avoided. So the Bhagavatam is very emphatic on this point. And to be able to keep away from such people, one has to mold one's life so that one is always absorbed in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord in the association of devotees. Correct? For example, Saturday evening, we are all here. What does it mean that we are all here? One thing it means is we are discussing Harikatha, but it also means simultaneously we are not somewhere else, where we could have been indulging in sense gratification and discussing about materialistic things with others who are materialistically attached. Correct? So we are molding our lives in that way. Because only by cultivating this taste for hearing and chanting, one will eventually come to the point of developing disgust or distaste for sense enjoyment. Many people who are sadhakas, many aspiring devotees, practicing devotees, somehow have this kind of a misunderstanding that when they will develop distaste for matter, then they will engage nicely in Krishna's devotional service. So they are waiting for that day when distaste for matter will come. But the Bhagavatam, the Acharyas, the scriptures, they are very, very clear that distaste for matter comes only when one develops a positive taste for Harikatha, for Bhakta Sangha, for Hari Kirtan. Krishna has already explained this principle in the Bhagavad Gita. Raso varjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Even though niraharasya dehinah, even though there is some taste in material enjoyment, when a devotee experiences a higher taste, this higher taste is gradually cultivated by continuing to hear and chant in the association of devotees. When one continues to do that, tad joshanadhya pavargavartmani, faith will come, taste will gradually come. So when that shraddha rati, bhaktir anukramishati, when the taste starts coming and that taste for Harikatha is beginning to be experienced, very clearly the devotee can begin to see how the taste of bhakti is so much superior to the taste of the prakrita rasa. Raso varjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Even though there is some pleasure in material things, he is able to easily give it up. Raso varjam rasopyasya, even though there is some pleasure. Why? Param drishtva, because he is experiencing a higher taste. So the solution to actually become detached from matter, the only real solution the Gita and the Bhagavad gives is to develop a higher taste. And the way to develop a higher taste is to continually practice, even though one may not yet have a taste, still continually practice hearing, chanting, serving in the association of devotees who have faith and who have taste. That is the secret of spiritual advancement. Isn't that what happened in the life of Narad Muni in his previous life? Small boy. He had no taste, but just because he faithfully sat down, heard from the great souls, served them, he said, I developed taste. He said he developed attraction to the transcendental principles. just by being in the association of these great. So that is the gift that Vaishnav Sangha gives us. And that is the gift we are hankering for. Because when we become blessed with that gift of attraction to Hari Katha, Hari Kirtan, the attraction for material life automatically pales away. And that opens up the way for real, solid advancement in spiritual life. They also explain other principles. They say that the Kumaras say that one must be non-violent in one's dealings. That is very careful not to hurt others. One must follow the instructions of the acharyas, follow in their footsteps, follow their examples. One must follow the principles of devotional service, but without any material desire. And one should be very careful not to criticize or blaspheme others. In a very simple way, simple living, high thinking, without being overly affected by the various dualities of life. One must continue to do his sadhana. One must tolerate. Tam titikshasva bharata. This is a very important principle. Devotees should not expect that just because they have come to spiritual life, now no problems are going to come in their life. This is again, a wrong expectation. One may recognize that one is drowning in an ocean, but just that recognition doesn't make the ocean peaceful. The ocean will still continue to toss you. When we recognize we are following the ocean, the duty of the person who's following the ocean is to look for a boat on which he can sit so that he can carefully and very comfortably cross over the ocean. But the waves will still be there. Even he's on the boat will also be rocked. But at least he will not drown. So while one is in the journey, even on the ship, and what is that ship? This is explained later in this chapter itself. The ship is the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the captain of that ship is the spiritual master. This example is given many times in the Bhagavatam. It's mentioned here also later. Taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like getting onto that boat. So devotee very seriously takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, understands very well that all the reversals in life that may be coming, even as he's practicing devotional service, are all arrangements sent by the Lord to purify him. He doesn't become disturbed. Tatte nukampam susumikshamano bhunjanameva atmakritam vipakam ridvag vapuvir vidadam namaste jive tayo mukti pade sadaya bhak. He tolerates them and continues with faith and determination to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and progresses towards the ultimate destination of life. In that way, he continues his practice and gradually develops detachment from matter and attraction, more and more and more attraction for hearing the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of God. The Bhagavatam says that these pastimes of the Lord, hearing of these pastimes are like decorations on the ear of a devotee. And this is the simplest and the safest way for the devotee to situate himself in a transcendental platform. Devotees do not have to do big yajnas or big meditations, complex tapa to be situated in transcendence. That is the yogis and the jnanis do. With great difficulty they do that. So with great difficulty, what the jnanis and yogis try to work towards, the devotee easily attains simply by remembering the name, form, qualities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. So this intense remembrance and absorption in the Lord itself, and this kind of fixed attachment of the Lord happens with the blessings of the spiritual master. It just doesn't happen just by sadhana. See, sometimes we think, oh, just because we utter the mantra and pull the beads, Yeah, that helps, but ultimately the real spiritual advancement, the real rapid advancement, the real advancement happens with the blessings of the spiritual master, and then true knowledge and true detachment awaken within the heart. And that fire of that transcendental knowledge, when it is awakened with the blessings of the spiritual master, burns away all materialistic tendencies. It is just like fire which is within the wood ultimately consumes the wood itself and burns itself away, and only pure fire remains. Similarly, all materialistic tendencies, not just the gross body, but even the subtle body and all the karmas and the anarthas within the body are all annihilated. Again, we see that the scriptures again and again emphasize that ultimately for substantial advancement, one needs the blessings of the spiritual master. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadan nagati kutopi dhyan stuvam tasya shastra sindhya. So when one gets the blessings of one's Diksha and Shiksha Gurus, one can make nice spiritual advancement. So when a person like this becomes free by this process of advancement, becomes free from all material desires, and he goes beyond the material qualities of Sattva, Raja, Tama, he becomes ultimately transcendentally situated. When he is situated in the transcendental platform, the pure devotee fully realizes that his soul and the Supreme Soul are qualitatively one. All this while he was thinking of himself as a material body, or even though as a yogi may not be thinking, but at least philosophically he was thinking of himself as a soul, but bodily he was conscious of himself as a body. But now he's actually able to perceive himself as transcendental, as spiritual, as qualitatively non-different from the super soul. The Bhagavatam says, just like a dreamer, when the dream is broken, and then there are again no longer two. There's not a dream life and a real life. The real life becomes the real life. The dream life evaporates. Similarly, an awakened soul understands his position very clearly. That's why liberation is defined as Sarvopadhi Vinirmuktam Tatparatvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktiruttama. Transcendental bhakti is when one becomes free from all material designations. Up until that time, the living entity is identifying himself based on his body, his birth, his various other considerations. That bodily identification is still strong. But the Kumaras explain, when a person becomes actually advanced in devotion, he is able to see very clearly. That mind which was becoming agitated when it was having objects of sense enjoyment in its mind, when the mind of a materialistic soul becomes attracted towards sense objects, it is said that one's real consciousness becomes totally sucked away by the desire for sense enjoyment. And that is why sense enjoyment is said to be like poison. Vishaya. Visha means poison. Vishaya means sense objects are known as Vishaya. They're like poison. They're poison for the soul. Why? Because they suck away the spiritual energy of the soul. One's real consciousness becomes lost. Just like the water in a lake, the Bhagavatam says, if there is huge big grass straws, all those grass straws gradually suck away all the water and make the whole lake dry. Similarly, if the living entity allows his mind to wander and focus on sense enjoyment, all his consciousness will be diverted and will be sapped of all energy. and one will not be able to make any spiritual progress. And when one is absorbed like that, one becomes totally forgetful of one's real position, that one is actually spirit soul, not matter, that one is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And in that deluded state, one doesn't understand who he is. And based on a false identification that I am this body, I am the enjoyer, I am the Lord, I am the well-wisher, with this kind of a false, illusory concept, the living entity performs all kinds of activities, which even though he thinks that they will give him happiness, actually because of his misfounded understanding, simply increase the living entity's misery, simply make him miserable. In such a state, the soul is considered lost, totally bewildered. Is working hard for happiness, but because he has totally lost it, doesn't understand who he is, what will give him happiness, doesn't understand what is sadhya, what is the goal, what is sadhana, what is the means for happiness. Having no understanding of sadhana and sadhya, the living entity is bewildered and just indulges in activities thinking that they are the source of happiness, but they simply increase the misery and entanglement again and again. The soul becomes lost. The four Kumaras explain that as long as a living entity thinks that there is something more pleasing to him than self-realization, that is the biggest obstruction for the self-realization. Very interesting. Which essentially means that if we are giving something in life more importance than self-realization, than spiritual advancement, then we are going to be lost. And that is why it is important, the four Kumaras say, that to not get this tendency in human society to get continually lost only in thinking how to make money, how to enjoy. This absorption in this consciousness. Of course, nothing wrong with maintaining a family and earning money per se. But if that itself becomes the obsession, that becomes the be all and end all of life, then one's real self-interest is compromised. And when jnana and bhakti is given up, one eventually goes down, down, down and goes into lower species of life, like trees and stones. So one must be very, very careful. And the Kumaras say that those who want to make spiritual progress and those who want to cross over this ocean of samsara, of this suffering of continual birth, old age, disease and death, they must be very careful to not associate with the lower modes. And lower modes are basically indulgence in sense enjoyment of various kinds, whether it is Rajoguna or Tamoguna. This kind of hedonistic means activities which are basically focused on sensual enjoyment. They are the abstractions, they are the real obstructions to the evolution of the soul. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That is four Purusharthas. Of course, amongst the four, liberation is the most important. Because Dharma, Artha, Kama are still at the material platform. Liberation is to be taken more seriously because Artha, Dharma and Kama ultimately are within the cycle of birth and death. They are also perishable. And then liberation, and then ultimately beyond liberation is pure devotional service, which is the real eternal position of the conditioned soul. So like this, the Kumaras are advising Prithu Maharaj, and through Prithu Maharaj, all the assembled citizens and of course all of us, how we should be so careful, how we should be so serious about the real goal of life, and what are the principles we have to adopt, how we should carefully avoid association of people, things, and desires, which will take us away from the real goal of life. So that is why one should cultivate one's relationship with the Lord and take full shelter of Him, because He is the only one who is transcendental to all the modes of material nature. So this kind of liberation from the modes, which is normally very, very difficult for the yogis and jnanis, for those devotees who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the Lord, for them they can very easily overcome the modes by very easily overcoming these hard and knotted desires for fruitive activities. See, the desire for fruitive activities or the desire for materialistic gain. What does fruitive activity means? To do something to get something material. This tendency is very deep rooted in the heart of the living entity, and this tendency is actually an obstacle for bhakti. And that is why even after we come to bhakti, we sometimes tend to be so fruitive. What will I get? What will I get? What will I get? We fail to realize that bhakti is its own reward. But when we gradually, through the association of sadhus, gradually become trained in that consciousness and start performing selfless devotional service, then this hard knots in the heart for fruitive भिद्यन्ते हृदय ग्रंथि छिद्यन्ते सर्व संशय क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि पश्चय आत्मनीश्वरे. These knots are broken. It's very difficult to break these knots of fruitive desires in our heart. It's not at all easy. But when we take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, it is possible. Jnanis and yogis try through tapasya, through dhyan, but it's very difficult to remove this deep-rooted desire. And that is why the Kumaras say, our advice to you is, please engage in bhakti of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Because only through bhakti, the deepest material attachments can be uprooted permanently and irreversibly. It is not possible through karma, jnana, yoga. Only through bhakti. That's why again the Kumaras emphasize the special position of bhakti. Yes, karma, jnana, dhyana can help one to purify, can help to burn sin, can help one to come and rise and come close to the transcendental platform. But the deepest seeds of material desire, the deepest knots, the deep roots of fruitive desire, which are in the heart of the living entity since time immemorial, they cannot be plucked out by the process of karma, jnana, or yoga. The acharyas elsewhere give another example. Actually, that's a verse in the Bhagavatam itself. I do not remember where, but we have discussed that shloka already. Just like a farmer, when he clears the crop, even though the weeds may be externally plucked out and removed and everything else may be leveled, but still the seeds of the weeds are still in the ground. And when the rain comes again the weeds will grow. So yoga, karma, jnana processes which will externally clean it, but the deep-rooted desires remain. So what do farmers do? Rather than just cutting the crop, they burn it. They burn the whole land. So when the land is burned with the fire of bhakti, then the deep-rooted seeds of the weeds which are inside the ground also get burned. When the seeds of the weeds get burnt, scorched, they cannot sprout again. The deep-rooted tendency to enjoy independently of the Lord is the root of all our problems, is at the root of what gives us fruitive desires. And that can only be countered through the process of pure devotional service, because pure devotional service means developing a mentality which is exactly opposite, which means nothing for me, everything for Krishna. And what is the materialistic mentality? Everything for me. Some people may say, no, but Krishna is also there. Yeah, Krishna is also there, but Krishna is also for me. Not that I am for Krishna. Krishna is for me. What does that mean? God is there to provide for me. God is there to solve my problem. God is there to fix things for me. God is there to fulfill my desire. So even God, a selfish person sees as a order provider, not as a master, not as an enjoyer. So one has to get away from that mentality, and that happens only through the cultivation of pure devotional service. And that is why this ocean of nescience is so difficult to swim across, which is infested with sharks of so many kinds of dangers. So many yogis are trying to swim across this dangerous ocean. Yogis, jnanis, they are trying to swim across, but there is the sharks of material desires are infesting this ocean. So our recommendation to you, Prithu Maharaj, is do not try to swim across this dangerous ocean like the yogis and the jnanis are trying. Quickly get on to the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord. Which means take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, because only in that boat where you have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, you will be protected from all these sharks. You will be protected from drowning within the three modes. So beautiful. Even though the ocean is very, very difficult to cross, if you take shelter of the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, you will be able to cross over this ocean and cross over all the dangers by His grace. Tesham aham samudharta mrityu samsara vartmani bhavami na chirat parthamaya veshata chetasam. Those who have taken shelter of me and fixed their minds on me, I become the quick, swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death, Krishna said in the Gita. So with this very, very beautiful instructions, even though four Kumaras were there, one of the Kumaras was speaking. It is not mentioned who exactly it was, but one of them was speaking. All others were, all are equally learned. Prithu Maharaj became very happy. He felt so blessed by hearing this wonderful Harikatha. He thanks the four Kumaras. He says that, you are so kind to me, O Brahmana. Previously, Lord Vishnu had sent me, had given me blessings. Now he is giving me blessings again by coming back and giving me darshan in your form. What does that mean? Pure devotees of the Lord are actually representatives of the Lord. Sakshat dharitvena samasta shastra. The pure devotees are representatives of the Supreme Lord. They carry the potency of the Supreme Lord. And they are distributing the grace of the Supreme Lord. So having darshan and association of the pure devotees is technically non-different from getting the darshan and blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's thanking them. You have been so kind. And Lord Vishnu had said, you will come to my house, and you Just to fulfill and honor the word of the Supreme Lord, you have come and given your blessings. You are actually so compassionate, just like the Lord is so compassionate. The Lord comes himself once in a while, but when he doesn't come, he sends his pure devotees like you to spread transcendental knowledge and to deliver fallen people. And you have been so kind to me by giving me this transcendental knowledge, by explaining the process of bhakti, of how I can transcend material nature, what is the greatest goal of life and how to achieve it. It is my duty now to offer you something in return. But actually, what can I give you? What is your position? What can I give? And even whatever material positions I have, all I have is nothing but remnants of the devotees and the Brahmanas. What can I give? Why Prithu Maharaj is saying like that all that I have is remnants, even though he is the king, great king. Because when he performed the Rajasuya Yajnas, he gave away all his wealth in charity. So in olden times, the kings would offer everything to the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas would just take what they need and give it back to the king and say, no, no, we don't need your whole kingdom. So in that sense, whatever the king has is considered the remnants of the Brahmanas. So he considers himself very humble. Whatever I have is not even mine. It is by the blessings of the Brahmanas that I have whatever I have. So he offered everything to the Kumaras. Prithu Maharaj said that actually everything belongs to the Brahmanas. Krishna is Go Brahmanya Hitayacha. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the Shudras worship the Supreme Lord, but the Supreme Lord is worshipping the Brahmanas. And that is why everything in this world actually belongs to the Brahmanas. And even the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and the others who administer and produce and all other things, they understand that the actual real owner of all the property of this world are the Brahmanas, and they are receiving the remnants of the Brahmanas. That was the consciousness of Prithu Maharaj. So how can I repay you? See, this is the truth, that one cannot repay the spiritual depth of our spiritual preceptors. Because you cannot put a price to transcendental knowledge, because no amount of money can cover the benefit of transcendental knowledge. The spiritual master is not just giving us information. It's not just like any other teacher that he's giving us, explaining some ideas to us. Oh, I could have read from the book also, but okay, he explained to me, good. It's not just about that. Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme prabhu se divya jnana hriday prakashito. The spiritual master is not just giving us theory. He is by his grace removing the ignorance in our heart and instilling transcendental knowledge, by which Chakshudan Dilojai Janme Janme Prabhu say that one can actually understand and see the world in terms of how it actually is. Give real eyes, and eyes of knowledge. Chakshudan Dilojai Janme Janme Prabhu say. And he extricates one from the ocean of material existence. That is why that kind of service is not just is not just the service of teaching, it is the service of delivering. The spiritual master delivers the disciple, not just teaches. There is a difference between simply a teacher and a guru. Guru instills faith, instills taste, removes ignorance, picks up and helps the student make spiritual advancement. And that is why, how can I repay? Prithu Maharaj is saying, except by folding my palms. ultimately such great souls have to be satisfied only by their own activities, because actually it's a truth that nobody can totally fully repay them. Even though one must do all efforts to try to repay them, one cannot actually repay such great souls. So in that way, Prithu Maharaj also glorified and appreciated the four Kumaras and appreciated the knowledge and their kind, compassionate nature. And that is the compassionate nature of the great souls. See, these great souls, it's not that they have something to achieve. It's not that they are going around preaching because they have something to achieve. They are already fully self-realized. It is their compassionate heart of the pure devotees that, seeing the suffering of other living entities, they are going around sharing this transcendental knowledge and enlightening others. They have nothing to gain for themselves, and they're not even expecting anything. So Prithu Maharaj is very happy. And he acknowledges that actually I cannot repay this debt. So after having acknowledged them and honored them, the Kumaras, they were worshipped by Prithu Maharaj and they left, and they went to Satyalok. These four Kumaras are residing in Satyalok. So then the last part of this particular chapter, the Bhagavatam glorifies the rule of Prithu Maharaj. So this episode of instructions by the four Kumaras is over. So when it is said Prithu Maharaj considered himself, practically fully satisfied, apta kaman iva, adhyatma shikshaya, by virtue of the Atma Gyan given by the Kumaras. The Acharyas say it is said almost fully satisfied. Why almost? Because his full satisfaction was in pure devotional service, not just in Atma Gyan. So Atma Gyan is satisfying, but ultimately it is pure bhakti. And he continued to perform very beautifully all his duties according to time, place, situation, according to his strength and financial position. And he performed the ideal example of performing all his duties exclusively to satisfy the Supreme Lord. So he said that very, very beautiful example. So one may say that, great souls like Prithu, they don't need to perform material duties. Why are they performing? So we have discussed this many times, but just very quickly to recap. The pure devotees who are beyond the material modes still perform their prescribed duties, like Krishna explained in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. They perform that not because they need to, but they perform that for various reasons. And what are the various reasons? The 4th chapter explains to set the right example for people in general. How to behave, how to act, how to live. They want to set the right standards of varnashram behavior. They don't want to set a wrong example for people to copy. They also don't want others to criticize bhakti by calling the bhaktas as irresponsible and whimsical. So they want to set the right example. And they want to protect bhakti itself by unscrupulous people who may try to imitate the position of these very, very advanced transcendental Babajis. They are always detached. They are never interested even in the goals of the karmas, but they are simply performing that as a service to the Lord to set an example and guide people in general. Prithu Maharaj always in his heart remained keeping the mood and maintaining the mood of a servant of the Lord. He always was conscious of the fact that the Lord is the owner and the proprietor of everything, and even the kingdom. I'm just a caretaker. I'm not the owner. I'm just administering everything on his behalf. And he would dedicate all his activities and the fruits of all his activities to the Lord. Even though he had wealth, he had kingdom, he had a beautiful wife, Archie. He had 5 children, huh? 5 sons, Vijitaswa, Dhumrakesha, Haryaksha, Dramina, and Vrika. And he displayed all divine qualities of all the devatas. He was always detached. Padma Patra Ivambhasa, the Gita says. That's like a lotus in a water. The lotus leaf is just above the water, and water cannot stick on the lotus leaf. Put a drop also, it will just slip off. That is how a great yogi is. That is how a great bhakta is. Is in the world but not of the world. And the only way to be able to do that is to be exclusively dedicated to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this way, very beautifully, Prithu Maharaj continued to give all protection to his kingdom, and the last 7-8 verses of the chapter describe the qualities of Prithu Maharaj by comparing the various qualities. It is said like Prithu Maharaj displayed all the qualities of all the devatas. So the various qualities of the devatas are compared, are mentioned and compared with Prithu Maharaj. So I'm going to just briefly mention a few. Prithu Maharaj was pleasing and celebrated like the moon. He was powerful and exacting like the sun. He was unconquerable like the fire, which means nobody could disobey him. He was unsurpassable like Indra. He was tolerant like the earth. Like the heaven, he was able to fulfill all desires of anybody. He was satisfying everyone like rainfall. He was unfathomable like the sea, that nobody could discern what was going on in his mind. He was fixed in his purpose like the Meru mountain, which is at the center, the axis of the universe. Like Yamraj, he had the right intelligence to deliver justice. He had opulences like the Himalayas, riches like Kuvera, bodily and sensual strength like Vayu. And for the wicked people, he was intolerant like Rudra. He was beautiful like the Cupid and fearless like the lion, affectionate like Manu, and powerful like Brahma. Knowledgeable of Brahman like Brihaspati, and he had perfect control over his senses, just like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was always devoted to cows, elders, Brahmanas, and the Vaishnavas, and always engaged in helping others with great humility and cheerfulness and bashfulness, never proud, always having a very beautiful, deep service attitude. So this kind of reputation Prithu Maharaj had, and this kind of reputation was spread all over the universe. And all the ladies and saintly person heard the glories of Prithu Maharaj. And the Bhagavatam concludes the chapter by saying that the sweetness of the glories of Prithu Maharaj are as sweet as the glories of Lord Ramchandra. What a comparison. Lord Ramchandra's glories are so sweet. So Prithu Maharaj's glories are, kind of put on that pedestal. Amazing, amazing. Prithu Maharaj ki jai. So that brings us to the end of this chapter. We are dot on time. So this chapter is a philosophical conversation. We are almost coming to the end of Prithu Maharaj's episodes. The next chapter is Prithu Maharaj going back home, back to Godhead. So So that's the last chapter of how he went back to world. So very, very extraordinary personality. Like what you said, to remain detached amidst such great opulence is very, very difficult. Kumaras was so extraordinarily empowered. It's not easy at all. So I'm opening up the floor. Any questions, comments, anybody has, you can take. Wonderful. So thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Again, a quick reminder for those who came in late. Tomorrow is Shayana Ekadashi. Look at the local Vaishnav calendar for the breakfast time in your respective areas. I believe all over it is tomorrow only. If somebody has a different calendar, please let us know. But at least in Mumbai, it is also tomorrow. In Kuala Lumpur, it is tomorrow. So I am believing that for all of us, pretty much from Mumbai to Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, it is, will be tomorrow. So please observe that. And today is Jagannath's return Ratha Yatra, the Bahuda Rath Yatra. So let's take blessings of Jagannath also. Thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samveda Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. So I'll see you on Wednesday to continue our discussion of Chaitanya Charitamrita in Chaitanya Pravaha. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you
Hare
very much.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Prashant ji. Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare
Hari
Krishna
Bol.
Prabhu.
Bhaskar, Hare Krishna. Bhaskar
Thank you,
Prabhu is now in India. Shraddha ji, Hare Krishna. Rita ji, Hare Krishna. Sini ji, Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Master Ji, Prema Mataji. Very good night to everyone.